Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. My name is Daniel. I'm glad that you are with us, whether you are listening to this on the go or you're watching this. We are so glad you are with us. In the studio, on the far end, Mr. Brian Sevitz is with us, and here in the middle, we have our special guest, Mr. Kevin Brown, which we are so glad that you are here. It is freezing outside.
It's cold.
And you were just saying your hands are taking a minute.
Still
Taking a minute to warm up from coming inside. So we hope you stay warm. It is definitely a day to stay inside and to listen to a podcast. And so we're glad that you're with us. Before we get to anything, let's do a little recap of Sunday. This Sunday, we are almost done with, we're not quite yet, done with our series called The One for Me. And Brian preached this week, and he got to bring up some guests, and they shared their testimony, Janelle Owen and JT, and I thought it was a really great Sunday. Brian, was there anything that you had to cut out a lot of your sermon
Yeah.
because we just knew there wasn't enough time? Was there anything that you cut that you're like, I really wish I could have shared this?
I don't think so. You know, I'm always a person that, like when I used to write in school, I'm one of those people that writes the same thing 3 different times and says it a little different ways, and then they just put red all over it, crossing out the redundant stuff. So
it was
when I
okay.
edit my sermon, I just go do that for myself. But I thought that those guys did such a good job for not... One of the hours I said this, I think, I like to go through interviews ahead and kind of know what they're going to say.
Yeah.
And then work my sermon around what they plan to say. I wasn't able to do that because I was in Mexico.
Yeah, you were traveling.
And I wrote the sermon down there in the hotel and, finished it in the van. And really they said most of the things that I would have hoped that they would say to illustrate those points. And so I thought it was great. And JT is one of those people that has been the one not too long ago, for somebody in our church. And I'm sure in that process, Janelle didn't really think of it that way.
Yeah.
He was just being a Christian, being what he considers to be the hands and feet of Jesus, helping somebody. But it turns out it was really impactful. So
Yeah. Yeah, and the result isn't always what we see in JT, but it is really cool to see it. I mean, his story is not done yet by any means, but it's kind of cool to see how it all came full circle, where you could see, Janelle's actions of helping him help bring him to Jesus, and now he's actively participating in following Jesus. It's just a cool thing. So we were talking about the idea of Jesus being the good shepherd and how he chased after the one that was lost, and because God did that for us, we get to help do that for others. And so if you missed that, go to tlcc.church. You can catch up on that sermon, or on Facebook or YouTube. I would encourage you at least, skip all the song stuff. I did the songs this week. Skip all the song stuff and then go watch the testimony time of Janelle and JT. They did a fantastic job.
One thing I wanted to mention was Todd made a plea for more money to help finish that project in Mexico.
Well, do a quick what project you talk about?
So the project, if you weren't here, we had taken money to buy the metal for the roof of the church expansion, basically what will be the sanctuary in the future of the church down there. And the walls are up, the trusses are up, and the metal was purchased, even though we didn't get to put any of it up yet. But they needed insulation to put up, and we didn't really put those pieces together till we arrived. And we were like, well, we don't want to buy the metal and not have them be able to put the metal on, so we went ahead and we went ahead and put the insulation on the credit card, and hopefully it's been delivered or will be soon. And so Todd had said we needed some more money, and what we want to let you know is we got that much money and some more.
Wow, that's
great. And there'll always be extra things.
Yeah.
So I mean, that money will be needed for the roof, I guarantee you, one way or another. But
yeah. So Fidel, who's our missionary there that we support, he's currently helping lead, and he's got some people with him, 2 different churches now, and they're doing an expansion. And this is in Casas Grandes.
Yeah.
That they're expanding the church building there, and there's a lot of great things that are happening, and so that money, for one, is going to go directly to them to help with this building project, but 2, has already been used. Some of it like you said, it's
Yeah.
already been purchased. So
Oh, yeah.
it's really cool what they're doing there. And if you want to watch that update, Brian gave a little of that on the beginning of his
and had
sermon
some
too.
pictures.
Yeah.
So the church there is hoping this summer to be having VBS. That building by no means will be finished.
Right.
It'll be block walls and a roof, but they'll have at least VBS games and stuff there. And then maybe by the next year, if we go to help again, we can help with more of the finishing of that building. That's the goal. And so they take a trip every February.
And you made it across the border. You got it back just fine. No problems. Everybody's worried about
15,000 Mexican National Guard troops on the border, just like we've been told. They were everywhere.
Yeah. And it was safe, and you were fine. And so they take a trip every year. And so if you're someone's like, hey, that would be interesting to get connected with the trip. It's a long trip to get down there, but it's not the most expensive. It's enjoyable. You stay in a hotel. It's not like you're sleeping outside every night. It's one of those trips that most anybody could do. Yeah. Okay, there you go. There's your catch up from Sunday. Real quick, we got a couple announcements for you to be aware of going into this week. One of those is the inclement weather that's happening right now. We were off the last 2 Wednesday nights. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We know it's going to be cold. You can still get around out there just fine. The roads aren't terrible. But we're not sure what's going to happen. So just as a reminder, our typical policy is if the schools cancel, then we cancel our programming for that night. We're not sure what we're going to do, but we'll put that out there through email and through Facebook and announcements. You'll know what's going on for sure. But just as a heads up, we know this week is very, very cold. So that's the first thing. Brian, what else?
And tonight there was going to be Mental Wellness Connect groups, which is like Grief Share, Divorce Care. I think Divorce Care for Kids, maybe Al-Anon. Whichever ones typically meet on Tuesday. If that's you, they're not meeting tonight.
Yep, they can't.
So don't show up for that. I wanted to mention, and it goes right along with that, in the sermon Sunday, I talked about Room at the Inn, which is the community's warming shelter, and they need more volunteers. It's one of those things where you're basically supervising homeless people who are sleeping there overnight, helping get them coffee or food if they need it when they come in. It's very simple. Sometimes you can sit and play cards. You can talk, you can watch a movie with people, and then eventually they go to bed. So it's really not much to it. But what I wanted to say is, if you're watching this today, Tuesday, me and Mike Mathis will be down there tonight starting at 6. You're really welcome to stop by if you just want to see what it's like. It's a corner of Morley and Coates at that's First Christian, right? First Christian Church. You go in the side door, which is there close to the Sam's Health Mart and those things, and you can just ring the doorbell. We can show you around, let you kind of know the ropes. I got on the fly training. I never had training before I served, but it's pretty simple. You're really there to just interact with people who stop to get warm, spend the night, and supervise. So
That's great. All right, and then our final announcement leads into Kevin being here today. We've got some events coming up that we want to let you know about. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start interviewing you because I want to get into this. You are a two-timer now on this show. You've been here before.
Yes.
Now, were we back here or were we back in the library?
I was right here.
We were in here.
Just not these fancy microphones that we have today.
Yes. Well, we got always upgrade, always improve. All right. So what we do is, and you've done this before, but just so everybody's on the same page, I'm going to set a timer, and in 60 seconds or less, would you introduce yourself to everybody? Okay. Ready? Go.
Okay. Well, my name is Kevin Brown, and I work full-time for Central Christian College The Bible, and I can't believe it, but it's been 8 years since I started with the college now, so I've been there. I feel like I'm a veteran of the college. My wife is Angie. You will see her working with the 3 and 4-year-olds on Sundays. She's typically teaching for Mary. Yep. She loves working with kids. She also works for the Early Childhood Learning Center. She's very good with kids, has a lot of patience, and shows a lot of love to those kids, and some of them can be quite challenging at times. So, but we have 2 adult children, Zach and Cassie, and We are originally from Iowa, lived in Indianola, Iowa, attended the Indianola, Iowa Church of Christ, which is an instrumental Church of Christ similar to Timberlake. But we moved here, like I said, 8 years ago to work for Central. I'm executive director of advancement services for the college. Really love what I do. Love going out and visiting with people and learning about their lives and challenging them to honor God by giving what God's given, giving back to a ministry of their choice, and hopefully that's Central.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
That's great. You nailed it.
All right.
Well done. You also have to pray for him a little extra hard because of who he's a fan of for football. He is a Bears fan. How did that happen with being in Iowa?
Yeah.
He's got the Bears there. You're Cubbies and a Bears fan,
yeah,
right?
That's right. That's right.
My.
Well, you got to think about my age and the fact that the 1986 Super Bowl champion Chicago Bears had the Super Bowl shuffle with William Refrigerator Perry,
The Refrigerator.
Jim McMahon, and of course the biggest thing at that time was the Super Bowl shuffle. And so if you're online, you can Google that and listen to that again. But that honestly became the reason I became a Chicago Bears fan. And Chicago Cubs, I mean, they're just the best baseball team out there.
Ever.
So, I mean,
Brian's like, that's debatable. We got a Cubbies fan and a Cardinals fan over there, and I'm the oddball out.
Based on the last couple of years, I'm just not going to say much.
Say that you're a Cardinals fan.
It's rough living in Missouri at times.
It is.
Get a lot of ribbing, but it's all good.
It is.
It's all good.
So, part of your job, when did you take on doing the men's conference? Part of your job is to do the Solid Men's Conference. When did you take that on? Tell us a little bit about it. And then I was curious, why did you pick the theme this year? Because the theme this year is temptation and trauma, which that's not like a, hey, come and let's have a good time. Like that's like a serious thing. What led you to that?
Okay. Well, first of all, this is my second year of leading both Solid and Shine. Sherry Wallace did a fantastic job for over 20 years, from my understanding, and she was just ready to lighten her load and to empty her plate a little bit. And so they tapped me on the shoulder and said, we really believe this is an advancement event. It's a time we get together with our donors and we give the chance to give them something back. And so that's how I got involved in that. And so this is my second year of leading that. And just to put a plug in, that is going to be on Thursday, March the 20th at 3:30. You can register online at cccb.edu/solid, and you can register for that online. But the reason temptation and trauma, maybe not as exciting as you thought I would say, but about 2 years ago, our church leadership network, which is underneath the umbrella of Central Christian College of the Bible, started some webinars that both John Hampton and David Vaughn started leading. And I immediately felt like these guys are someone that you could really relate to. They're fun, but they're wise, knowledgeable. And so when I had a chance to visit with them at ICOM in Oklahoma City, as a matter of fact, I asked them, would you ever consider coming and leading our Solid workshop and our Solid main session? And they were excited about it and said, I think we can probably make that happen. And knowing that they are retired ministers, they've done this ministry thing a whole lot longer than I have, I asked them, what do you think men need to hear? What do you think would really challenge our men of today? Not knowing our audience exactly, but they thought that sharing information about the temptation that Samson went through, as well as Delilah, and what kind of led up to that, would really bring some really interesting and some things that maybe we as men need to hear as we're facing temptation. And then the trauma part of it, John Hampton really believed that his sermon that he's done in the past about Joseph and the different trauma that he went through, being sold into slavery and being in prison, and the way he was able to deal with that and overcome some of these things, would really be something that men could really take into account and maybe really learn from that. And so the really solid biblical teaching from the Old Testament being able to be applied to what we still face today with temptation and trauma was how we decided upon the Solid Men's Conference. Plus, we're also doing a really good workshop, really designed for really strengthening church leaders and churches as well. And David Vaughn and John Hampton are going to be leading that, because that's what they really are in charge of with the Christian Church Leadership Network, that we're really trying to help churches and help them with their the preachers as they deliver sermons, and helping some of the challenges that churches face in everyday life and that sort of thing. So that's how it all came about.
That's really cool. So my brother, who's in Jefferson City, he's gone through some of the mentoring stuff that they've done,
great.
and those two guys were his mentors through that program. So he was super excited that they're going to be here. Really dynamic leaders.
Yes.
Great teachers. And I don't know if I think I've heard one of them speak. I don't know if I've heard both of them speak. So I'm really excited about it as well. It could be a great night for everyone. So for the Shine Women's Conference, when's that? Make a quick plug for that.
The Shines Women Conference is going to be on Thursday night, April the 19th. And that begins at 2:30 because we're going to have 2 different workshops this year that's optional. There's going to be 3 going on at a time, and so you have the opportunity to take in 2 of those workshops during the Shine Women's Conference. Those workshops, the one that we're going to be leaded by Kayla Wolf, is going to be about sharing the gospel boldly. And we would kind of going along with finding the one that we're doing here at Timberlake.
Oh, cool.
We really want to encourage women in particular to really be more comfortable about sharing the gospel message and sharing the testimony. And this class is going to hopefully get some talking points and some ways to share it more comfortably. This is what this Megan Rawlings and Kayla Wolf does through their ministry. It's called the Bold Movement.
Bold Movement.
And they really do some training to help women in particular to feel more comfortable about sharing the gospel message. So Megan Rawlings is going to be doing the main session, and she's just going to be talking a little bit about why we should believe the Bible, and really how the Old Testament played into the prophecy of Jesus, and making us all think about some different things on that aspect, so that when we talk to others, we can be more comfortable and sure of what we're saying in the gospel message.
Yeah, that's really cool. So this might get us off on a tangent, so I apologize if it does. But I was just curious, as someone who I was going to mention, you're on the board of the Missouri Christian Convention as well. So you've got Shine, you've got Solid, you got the Missouri Christian Convention.
Right,
I was talking with someone about this. It seems like everybody's got a convention, right? And we were talking about this as like, where do we go as a staff? And do you, since there's so many out there, do you still think conventions matter? And if so, like, what about conventions are still valuable for people today? Having been to a bunch yourself,
So growing up in Iowa, we at one time had the Iowa Christian Convention, and as a family, we attended that on occasion, but not regularly due to the timing. But unfortunately, the Iowa Christian Convention, like most of the Christian conventions in most states, have all gone by the wayside. And so there is that debate on whether or not there still is a need for conventions. And Missouri is one of the fortunate states to have, and last thing I checked, there might be 3 states that I know of that still actually have a Christian convention in their state, and I think ours has done really well because of the support of the Bible colleges here in Missouri. That's really made sure that we really put effort into it and make sure that we have leadership on the convention. But in my opinion, the Christian convention just shows there's more Christians outside of your church than there are inside the church, and you go there every year. You see the people that you want to talk to, and remind you out there that there are other things going on outside of your community, and being able to have a family feel, and going and having some really great speakers come in, have some great music, attend some really interesting workshops, and build on skills that you can learn to help you in your Christian walk, and to teach others, I think is invaluable. And so I hope that people will come out for the Missouri Christian Convention held at the Lodge of the Four Seasons on the 14th and 15th
of March. Yeah, so it's coming up
you
soon.
can register on that line for that. And Central has always been a big sponsor of that, and we're a Tier 1 sponsor again this year for that. And so we'll have multiple locations, including our bookstore will be there a lot of smaller towns don't have the opportunity to have Christian resources right there at their fingertips and that sort of thing. And so we bring that to the convention as a way to minister to others, and give supplies and material and resources that they can use back in their churches. So.
Brian, you go to a lot of conferences. Do you still? We were just talking about how some of them, the pricing on them have gotten outrageous. And like, do you still think they're valuable to go to?
I enjoy conferences. One thing that we were talking about earlier was, for us, sometimes they're just as much about the experience that the staff gets to have as far as team building as anything, because it's an excuse to go somewhere
Get
stay
away.
together, have more meals together than normal without distraction.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's value in that. But the conferences that I go to now, granted, there's some that I've stopped going to, and we've talked about that too. That are basically the whole thing's about a sales pitch for something, and it's just not really even a conference anymore. So there are some of those, but I have found that any of these conferences I go to, even the ones that have a lot of the same things from year to year, like Spire or the Getty Worship Conference that I've attended, I still come back with some stuff I wouldn't have read on my own, or wouldn't, even though it's available online and I could have just streamed it, I probably would have never taken that amount of time to do that. So there is value in it. And a lot of that, like I said, is getting out of the normal routine and just focusing on this slice of what I do for 2 or 3 days without all the other stuff. So as far as the Missouri one, what we would like you all to realize that are just in the church that maybe have never experienced something like MCC or even the Solid or Shine. And we have a lot of people in our congregation who have never taken advantage of any of those things, is to say we do think they're valuable. Like, you will get things there that aren't a part of our normal church routine or whatever. There will be speakers you hear that'll bring something unique. But as much as that is, it's seeing the church bigger than just our church here. I mean, you get to meet people. One of the things we wanted to ask you, I think, and I hope this isn't jumping ahead from what you
go ahead.
wanted to do, but
it all ties together.
Kevin gets to travel as well. I mean, and that's sometimes probably a good thing. Probably sometimes is not your favorite part of your job. I don't know, because I think you have to travel and speak. But I think there's probably a lot of positive in seeing different churches and the way they do things. And we wanted to give you a minute to talk about, as you have traveled and seen a lot of different kind of churches, what are some of the unique things you've seen about churches?
Yeah. Well, that's a good discussion question that could take a lot longer than this podcast time can. Right. But first of all, I love going out and visiting churches. One thing that's very similar to all the churches I go to is people are friendly. Yeah. People are nice. They love Jesus, and there's no doubt about that. And you can see that when you walk into a church. Some churches have more people that are more open and welcoming you to, maybe more excited to see you than others are. However, you can still see that they love being there. They love the people that they're there with. And so you can obviously feel that Jesus is in the room, and they love Jesus, and they want to be at church, and they're devoted to church. So that's the common thing. I also really find that the common thing is there's strong biblical preaching in all the churches, which is a really exciting thing to see in the churches. That's
interesting that you'd highlight that, because I think sometimes the fear is the opposite of that. But when you're on the road traveling and stuff, that you see strong biblical preaching happening.
I haven't, honestly, I cannot think of one church that I've been to in our movement, Restoration Movement churches, that have had poor or questionable teaching of theology from the Bible. And so that's exciting for me to see. I was there on the right Sunday. I didn't see, they were on their best behavior. I don't know. But what I've seen from what I've been in pulpits, I always walk away satisfied that they are teaching the Bible. Some churches spend more time in the Bible than others do, as far as talking about the Bible. But I found that to be the biggest difference I see in churches, and it's one that everyone probably realizes, is the style of worship music that's being done in the church. And I'm obviously a little bit biased to Timberlake, but our worship service at Timberlake is one of the best. I mean, honestly, I would honestly put it up there as one of the best, comparing the churches. And there's just so many talented musicians and so much technology and that goes into making that all work and flow. It's just I enjoy coming here and being able to worship so when I'm on the road at some churches that are maybe rural that still have just all piano only and some one worship leader singing this the hymns, it's just always refreshing to come back to Timberlake. And so
Brian, pay the man. Just pay the man right now.
So we were talking about that the other day, because there's some newer people at church that are musicians, and I want to get them plugged in if we need to do an audition. And but one of the things they mentioned was, a lot of us, even if we sing or play something, we walk in here and we're like, they don't need me, and it's like, no, we still may need and want to include you, but I don't ever want to take for granted the talent we have here, because I know many churches do not have the pool of musicians to pull from that we have.
Absolutely. And they're very thankful when we bring our worship team from Central to come and lead worship for them. And they would always be welcome to having talented musicians come and being other than just some even sing to background tapes and that sort of thing, or music and such. But one thing I did find that there's a few churches out there that I found was very, I don't know if legalistic, but very, very conservative. But they still sell the Pledge of Allegiance before church starts.
Wow.
They'll sing, they'll sing the Pledge of Allegiance, and so they do that. And they also, there's some, of course, that are out there that still do prayer requests, that they basically open it up to the entire congregation, and they can pretty much tell you, which is great for the people that are there, but as a guest and don't know anybody in town, it can be the longest 5, 10, 15 minutes.
Who's going to look your way and be like, do you want to say something?
So those are some interesting things I've seen out on the road, but it is neat to go to all different sizes of churches and experience different things.
So when we talk about conferences, one of my favorite thing about conferences is getting just another, getting the perspective of we're not alone, but then also being encouraged, because you go into a conference, you go to a workshop, and then they bring up a situation or they bring up a problem, and you're like, oh, I'm not the only one that deals with that, or like everybody is having the same questions about what's the best way to handle kids that have run away, or what's the best way to handle this circumstance. And it's always encouraging to be reminded you're not alone. And I was curious, as you doing conferences and traveling in churches, church unity is something we talk a lot about, being unified as a local congregation, but we're also called to be unified as Christians in general. As you travel and see different churches, do you feel that sense of unity? Is there anything we can do to foster and help that kind of unity? What's your thoughts? Sometimes I don't always get much beyond the worship service that I'm in at the church. I have a lot of churches that I'm a part of and have to be in, so I don't always understand or hear the background or know what's going on in the background of the church. And so, but what I can see is that, we've always we already talked about it, that if someone from Timberlake isn't serving on a worship team at a certain week or whatever, if they're willing to take their talents and go out and help another church and maybe lead music or something like that. There are so many smaller churches in this area that don't have the people. They would eat that up in a heartbeat. There'd be a way to serve on a Sunday morning and be able to bring that talent to that church, and that would make a huge difference as far as what that church would feel like and that sort of thing. Our students do that a lot at Central. They go out and they are part of the worship team, and those churches just really love having students there, something different and that sort of thing. And so I think if there's a way for anyone that's at Timberlake that, don't take away from this church, but if they're willing to go out and on occasion help out another church, I think that would be a way to really reach out and help. And then inviting churches to come to special workshops that are being held here, or reaching out to some of the churches that don't have the programming and that sort of thing, invite them in and feel like they're part of this family, and being able to have our people work with their people and that sort of thing. I think that would be a really thing that could really help out a lot of churches that aren't blessed. Yeah, that was one thing that I didn't really ever take advantage of, because I've worked in small churches and now working here with a little bit of a bigger church. I never really took advantage of other churches' resources. And I started to near the end of my time at the church I was at before, where I would jump in with another church going to a conference, or I would tag in with them if they had something going on. We partnered with another church with their VBS. There was things that made a big difference utilizing the resources of other churches, and that's interesting you brought that up. I think sometimes our own pride can sometimes stop us from doing that, but it is good when we see each other as, we're helping each other in our ministries. One last thing I wanted to ask you about, and this could be its own podcast, but from your perspective of dealing with donor relations and developing relationships with lots of different leaders and churches, what's if you could forecast? Here's an issue I think is going to be a big deal in the next 10 years for the church. Do you have something that comes to mind? That's something that maybe all of us could think of. How do we prepare for it, and how would we face it?
Well, I don't think it's a big shocker, and I don't know that it's the only thing by any means, but a lot of churches struggle to find, particularly the youth ministers and the worship leaders. And so in churches that are blessed to have youth in their churches, continually encouraging and working with those youth and challenging them to consider either vocational ministry or full-time ministry when they graduate from high school is so important, because a lot of churches, the number of people out there that's willing to go into a church and work in a church and be on staff at a church are becoming far and few in between. And there's such a need out there, like I said, especially with youth leaders and worship leaders in the churches, that the churches that are blessed with youth really need to be encouraging, I think, and encouraging their youth to do some type of ministry, whether it's just a second job or just an opportunity to volunteer in a church, and just encouraging them to do that, because I think that's going to be an issue. And then also declining attendance in churches in general. A lot of churches that don't have a vibrant worship, or even worse, strong preaching. There's so many options online to be able to go and see some of that online, that if a person isn't being challenged by good solid preaching, that we found out that out of COVID, they will go online and go somewhere else. So that's why at the college we're really encouraging some of our ministers to go through cohorts and encourage one another and strengthen each other and encourage each other with more strong preaching and that sort of thing, and having different ideas of different ways of delivering sermons and that sort of thing. And so I guess I see that as probably the biggest issues out there, but by far I'm not an expert, but that's kind of what I see and hear when I'm out the road.
Yeah, I was just kind of scrolling through, and Brian, you might remember, because Barna put out some data about the disparity between how many preachers and ministers, whether it's worship or students, we're putting out versus the need, and how many preachers and leaders are retiring,
or leaving
ministry. Yeah, there's a huge disparity between we need someone to help lead this and the people that are actually there to do it. And so praying that first God would send people into the harvest field, and then two, encouraging students. We don't always think about ministry, encouraging people to go into full-time ministry. I don't know why that isn't as common. I know it was a big push for a while of like, consider full-time ministry, go to Bible college, go to some training, but we don't always think about it anymore. But it's a huge need. Yeah. And as a church, we can be praying for leaders. We can be encouraging our students, and maybe even some adults who have a giftedness and maybe an inclination towards leadership, and say, you should really consider doing this full time, because there is a huge need. That's great. Well, Kevin, we're glad that you've been here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the work that you do for the college, but also for the churches around Missouri, and the relationships that you build that ultimately benefit the kingdom of God. So thank you for doing that. And we hope that you'll consider men joining us for the Men's Solid Conference coming up on
March 20th.
And if you can be there for the whole thing, that's great. If you can make it, maybe even for the dinner and the evening portion of it, we'd encourage you to do that. We'll put more information out about that.
We're going to really later. Strong worship music by strong worship leaders.
Oh, it's going to be good. I did say yes this year, and so I'm excited about that. So I'll be leading music, and hopefully we'll get a good group there. Okay, that's it for today. Okay. Everybody's good? All right, ready, set, break.
See ya.
We'll see you here next week on the Ripple Effect Podcast. Bye.